Welcome back. I'm Manny Paiva. We covered the OHL draft last week, shortly after the NFL draft. And a draft really is the beginning of a new era, not only for franchises in the world of sports, but for players. It gives a chance for bad teams to improve, and it makes dreams out of players as they become a reality. Bayshore Broadcasting News intern Travis Pedwell had a chance to talk to Sportsnet NFL analyst Jim Lang about the NFL draft and get his view on what went on in the war rooms.
Is there anything that really jumped out at you during the draft?
I'll tell you, one of the things that jumped out at me was the fact that the Denver Broncos felt so strongly about Tim Tebow, the highly touted quarterback from Florida, that they traded up in the first round to get him. And, I mean, there's no question he has a lot of upside and talent, but he's still a work in progress. He still has some things to do to make the transition from the NCAA to the NFL. And I thought they would trade up in the first round to get him in the first round. Surprised a lot of people, and it did surprise me.
In St. Louis, Mark Bulger had little success. Does Sam Bradford have a chance with the team they have? And was he the right pick at number one?
I think he was probably their only option at number one. They had to rebuild the franchise, and that's what Detroit did the year before by getting a franchise quarterback in Matthew Stafford. Now they have a franchise quarterback in St. Louis and Sam Bradford, and now it's the responsibility of the Rams organization to build around him and give him the support he needs. There's no question. I think if they're smart, they bring in a veteran quarterback to take the beating and preserve Sam. Only play him in the right position and against the right team. No need to get him beat up because he's the future and you want him around another 10 or 12 years.
In years past, we normally see the first pick signed before the draft begins. Why was Bradford not signed before the draft this year?
Apparently it's a formality that his agent wanted to do the negotiation after the draft. Now, his guaranteed money is going to be upwards of $40 million. It will be a very, very large rookie contract, especially since he's a quarterback. So, I mean, that plays a factor into it. So I wouldn't read too much into it, but I highly doubt he won't get signed. I think the deal will be done in the next few weeks.
And Jim Lang has the second overall pick, and you're building a brand-new franchise. Do you take Sue or McCoy, and why?
I take Sue, especially if I'm Detroit, because of where they are as a football team. They got a tight end last year in Pettigrew. They got the quarterback in Stafford. They signed Kyle Vandenbosch in the offseason. And with Sue, it's a no-brainer. He's one of the great athletes to come into the draft. He can play right away because a defensive tackle, his responsibilities are very minimal. You just have to worry about a couple of gaps, get that player. Where Sam Bradford, I mean, you're learning an NFL playbook of upwards of 250 pages. There's so much more to learn where Sue can play from day one right away and help the football team and make them better. And I think that was a smart pick for Detroit to get him with that number 2 pick overall.
So talking about Tim Tebow again, should Jimmy Clausen have gone ahead of him? And so
No.
No,
I don't necessarily think Jimmy Clausen should have gone ahead of him. Now, I don't think he should have fallen as far as he did. I kind of thought maybe both of them would go in the second round. I mean, I had Clausen right at the end of the first round, early in the second round. I thought the only sure bet at quarterback for sure in the first round was Sam Bradford. Part of the problem is a lot of the teams that we're drafting have their quarterbacks, they have them locked up, have the money. And other teams look at Jimmy Clausen thinking, well, if I draft him in the first round, and I'm not really sure about him, I do have to give him a lot of guaranteed money. It's a lot of money for something I'm not sure about, where I could wait, see if I can get him later in the draft, and it costs me less money in contracts. So I think that was part of the problem, too. It was a very interesting draft, too, because this is the first time they did it in prime time with round 1, waited a day, and then picked it up again. So I think that added to the intrigue of the draft as well.
And would you say the 3 quarterbacks are better than Colt McCoy?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would. No, Colt's good, and don't get me wrong, Travis. I think he's a good quarterback, but I would agree with that I would take those 3 over Colt. But Colt is a very good second option after those 3 quarterbacks. The thing that was interesting about this draft is, I mean, they're not sexy picks, they're not household names, but there were a lot of really good linemen, defensive linemen, and offensive linemen that were taken in the draft that won't get a lot of headlines, but will make teams better, and that's why they drafted them in the first round.
What rookie, Jim, would you say has improved his team the most, and can you predict offensive and defensive rookies of the year?
Well, I say Sue is going to really help Detroit because of the position he plays and the need they have on the front four and their defensive front seven. He's going to help them right away. Offensive rookies, C.J. Spiller, the speedster out of Clemson, drafted by Buffalo, he will get work. The question is the offensive line in front of him. Now, Des Bryant is a very, very talented receiver with some question marks off the field, but then he goes to a Dallas Cowboys team offensively that's deep with Miles Austin and Tony Romo and Jason Witten, and he has the potential to do a lot of really good things. So I think if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with Des Bryant in Dallas, and my defensive rookie of the year, I go with Ndamukong Suh in Detroit.
Do you think C.J. Spiller is better than Ryan Matthews?
I think I do. He's faster. I think he's a little more of a multiple threat. He can do a lot of things. He can return kicks. I mean, you could play him as a receiver. I honestly thought Buffalo was going to try to pick an offensive tackle in the first round and maybe try to pick another running back if they felt they needed one in a second or third round. It's obvious they're going to get rid of Marshawn Lynch. Why would you draft C.J. Spiller in the first round? You have Freddie Jackson if you weren't going to get rid of Marshawn Lynch. So, I mean, that's something that's going to happen in the next few weeks. And, teams have very interesting draft strategies, Travis. I mean, they go through their own mock drafts. Teams do this to prepare for the draft, figure out what they need, whether it's a position, they need a defensive back, they need a quarterback, they need a running back, and sometimes they get locked in those positions, and sometimes they grade the best athletes they think are in the draft, and whoever's available, they grab them. And I thought it was also interesting this weekend that there were a lot of veteran players traded by the end of the draft, like Jason Campbell being traded from Washington to Oakland, and Leon Washington ending up in Seattle. And Seattle had a very good draft for Pete Carroll's first draft for the Seahawks. I think they should be very pleased.
And I've heard a lot of comparisons to Reggie Bush, C.J. Spiller and Reggie Bush. So
they're both very, very fast, and you can move them in a lot of different positions in an offense. I mean, they're not just going to be a running back. You can split them out as an H-back. They can be a receiver in the slot. They can return kicks, return punts, and they're a threat because of the kind of speed they both have. Spiller and Bush have that game-breaking speed that every time they touch the ball, they could score a touchdown.
So Buffalo Bills fans should get excited.
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, playmakers are good. Now, the big concern for the Chan Gailey and the coaching staff is to get that offensive line prepared so you're not wasting the pick. There's no sense drafting a player of that caliber if you're not able to block for him and give him a hole to work with. Now, if they can get the offensive line dialed in the mini camp and training camp and get it where it needs to be and give him some time and space to move, then C.J. Spiller can do some special things.
Is there a Tom Brady in the later rounds that could surprise everyone a couple years down the road from now? Or,
well, I think Colt McCoy in Cleveland is going to get a chance to really learn. I mean, he's going to be working under Mike Holmgren and Eric Mangini. I mean, don't forget, Mike Holmgren was the guy who groomed and developed Brett Favre when Brett Favre was a raw, untested quarterback who was basically dealt away from Atlanta after he was drafted by the Falcons. So I mean, you wonder with Colt McCoy, he comes from a good family, has a good work ethic. He wants to win. He wants to play hard. He will learn. He'll practice. He'll get stronger. And you wonder if he gets his opportunity and he really learns that offense, what he can do in Cleveland.
And what team or teams did the best in the draft?
Seattle did very, very well. Baltimore had a good draft. They addressed a lot of needs. I'll be amazed. I mean, Oakland's done some silly things in the last few years. They had a very good draft. If I had to pick one that really stood out, I would have to say Seattle Seahawks probably had the best draft.
And the worst draft?
Yeah, I didn't understand Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Jaguars made some interesting picks. They picked a defensive lineman in the first round. They probably could have gotten a second or a third round. No, it's not a bad draft. Denver had an interesting draft. Now, see, you think about the Denver Broncos in training camp now. They will have Tim Tebow, Brady Quinn, who they picked up in the offseason, and Kyle Orton. So that's going to be a real interesting challenge for Josh McDaniels to balance out the reps in practice, to soothe the egos, because each one of these three guys will think they're the starting quarterback, and that's going to be an interesting thing to juggle with the Broncos. So that's one of those drafts and draft classes in Denver. I want to wait and see how it all plays out.
All right. Thanks for doing this, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Travis. Anytime.
That is NFL analyst Jim Lang from Sportsnet talking to our news intern, Travis Pedwell. Again, St. Louis used the first pick to select Oklahoma QB Sam Bradford. The draft featured 224 players selected in 7 rounds for the 32 teams. To check out what your favorite team accomplished, you can go to the website NFL.com. Stay tuned. More sports talk around the corner on 560 CFOS.